Forgive freely because you've been forgiven freely, and as you forgive freely, you'll enter into more of the experience of freely being forgiven. Unforgiveness. This is so crucial. Unforgiveness is a cancer. It is a cancer to the soul. I couldn't preach a sermon on a more important topic than this. Now, forgiveness. See, to the extent that we have unforgiveness in our life, bitterness in our life, have something against someone in our life, it is a pollutant. It is a cancer. It clogs up everything. It clogs up your spiritual arteries. It clogs up your relationship with God, your ability to receive. It clogs up your ability to be a full human being, to be free. You cannot possibly be dancing with God fully and freely and vibrantly, fully alive, if you've got unforgiveness in your heart. Even if it's totally understandable that you have that unforgiveness, even if it's justified by all human standards, it still is a cancer in your life, and you need to be free of it. And so what the gospel is telling us to do is this. While we were yet enemies, God released us from our debt. We also are to release everybody else from their debt. Now that's what forgiveness is. It's simply releasing a debt. When someone does you wrong, they detract from your worth. You've got this unsurpassable worth. When someone wrongs you, it's like they steal some of your worth. They owe you something. They owe you your honor, respect. There's a sense of indebtedness created. And so part of us wants to demand the debt. You owe me an apology. You owe me, some sort of restitution here. What Jesus is saying is, let that go. That's what forgiveness is. Let that go. As the core of the kingdom is that we can get our life and our worth and our security, our lovability, all of our core needs met by our relationship with God, which means we no longer have to be demanding them from others. You owe me, which means we are free to let them go. They can't really steal anything that's core to us because the core of us comes from God. And so we're empowered to forgive, to let go. Release the debts. Release the debts. That's all forgiveness is. Forgiveness is not saying what you did was okay. Forgiveness is not saying that what you did wasn't that bad. It's not saying that. It could have been heinous. It's just releasing the debt. Forgiveness does not mean that you're going to feel good about this person. Forgiveness does not mean that you'll even like the person. Some people just aren't likable. There's nothing non-kingdom about that. You're commanded to agree with God that they have unsurpassable worth and they were worth Jesus dying for. But the stuff they do, you may absolutely hate and despise. That's okay. Forgiveness doesn't mean you're going to have warm fuzzies about anybody. Forgiveness does not mean that you're going to trust the person. The grandfather of someone in our congregation was saying, well, if you really forgave me, you'd let me babysit your kids again. Trouble is, he sexually abused the kids before. She ain't trusting him. And I wouldn't advise her to, but she can still forgive him. Trusting, I wouldn't trust most people to babysit my grandson until I get to know you really well. That's just an earthly assessment. But forgiveness is about releasing the debt. I'm not going to go walking around thinking about what you owe me, what you did to me, grumbling like that, because that's a maggot in your brain that is just eating away at your soul, harming you in more ways than you can probably possibly imagine. Doesn't mean you even want to hang out with a person or even want to see the person again. That's okay. What they did maybe was so terrible, you just don't want to, but you still let them go. It's just releasing the debt. And forgiveness does not mean that they'll reciprocate, that they'll break down and cry and ask for forgiveness, or that they'll even acknowledge they did anything wrong. They may not. Who cares? It's not about them. Forgiveness, Paul says about our enemies, to leave all judgment to God. Romans chapter 12, leave all judgment to God. He's the only one who can handle judging others. He's the omnipotent God. And so forgiveness is to say, you know what? Yeah, I would like to send you to hell, but that's God's business. And I'm going to release you from that. And God, I turn you over to God. And at first it may be, and I hope God judges them. You want to move beyond that as well. You trust that God will do the right thing. If God needs to, reconcile their accounts, he'll do it very well, thank you. You leave it to him. Paul says, leave all vengeance, all wrath, all judgment to God. We're to walk free of all judgment. And as we do that, we begin to enter into that kingdom flow of the joy of living without judgment and dancing with the triune God. Release the debt. Does someone owe you something in your own mind? Are you walking around with this? What Jesus is saying here is this. When you ask God to release you of a debt, Whatever someone has done to you, whatever debt they owe you, realize that you owed infinitely more than that to God, and he released you. So also, you need to release that person, whatever wrong it may have been. Yes, it may have been absolutely diabolical. Understandable that you'd be bitter about that. But can you see, the devil tries to tell us that we're empowered by hating somebody and holding on to unforgiveness. But you're not being empowered. You're continuing to be the victim. To the degree that we hang on to unforgiveness, we empower the victimizer to define us. When the truth is, only our God should have the right to define us. And he defines us very well and very beautifully on Calvary. Walk in a Calvary definition of yourself. Don't empower the ex-spouse or the mother or the father or the grandfather or whoever. Don't empower anybody to define you. To the extent that they empower you to define you, it's not just about you and them any longer. It affects your relationship with God and everybody else. God wants to be Lord over everything in your life because he's a holistic God. He wants to be Lord over this. And for him to be Lord over this is for him to take the judgment from you. You release it, and now you walk without any debt, without any holding anyone to the debt, and now you're free.